All right, yeah, if you close the door, you know that.
Which is for industry, it's actually very important.
And so remember, this was still in the collaboration world, so we thought that was that's very important, that you can lock yourself in a meeting room and you can be pretty sure that even though you're transmitting your data all over the room, it's not going to leave the room. Anyway, so in terms of the, for the software people, the important thing was this is a much smaller machine. It had less RAM and probably the same ROM, and it only had one 20 megahertz ARM in it, as opposed to two 20 megahertz Hobbits. So it was becoming much smaller, and the software, well, since we didn't know what it was hard to tell how that would affect us. But so here's a diagram. If you've ever seen that thing that Tufte always shows with the Napoleon's March, with the army comes in one end and they split up, and so I tried to do that for the Newton project here. So we all started on this thing called Newton, which is that big 7-pound thing, and we got to that point that you just saw, and it's somewhere around there. Steve Capps and Michael Chow figured out this was not going to work, and they had help from others, but they more or less spearheaded the thing.
Yes.
And they convinced themselves first, and then John Scully, that what we needed was a small device, something a little more like this.
Sorry, who did?
Michael Chow and Steve Capps. Michael Chow is kind of on the marketing side, Capps obviously the technical side. So something that was much smaller and much cheaper and did less and would ship faster, or ship at all, I guess.
There was a famous or infamous airplane flight on Apple's corporate jet where Scully, who was CEO at the time, was heading for some public speaking event or something. And Michael Chow, who was my boss in the Newton group, who was initially the only marketing person on the team amongst all of this R&D, and they were scribbling on, I think it was a New York Times Sunday magazine.
Yes.
There's a picture of that.
Capps still has that.
Yeah. And basically, Chow was riffing with Scully, saying, you know, this big thing's not going to work. The focus groups we're doing, people think it's a laptop. They think it's going to run Windows. It's going to run Lotus 123. We need to get something that's more like an organizer. And so Scully's like, oh, it could be, you know, XYZ size. It could cost $800. And they kind of back of the napkin sketched out this notion of a smaller pocket device.
So when that happened, that team split off into what we call Junior. And
officially, but
yes, that team called it Junior,
yes.
And they called the other one Senior. The other team, of course, called themselves Newton still. But basically 4 people, Capps, Andy Stadler, Paul Mercer, and Martin Ganholm, I believe, split off from the main team and started working on this totally new little thing, because they basically threw away everything else and started over. Although Bob did convince them to use the OS from the original Newton, but I think everything else was not there. So they started working on this, and it was done in more of a prototype form. At first, it was actually just a Mac application that Capps worked on just to get some of the UI ideas and some of the internal architecture thought out, but not really. I mean, the conception was that this was just a little device running an app. It wasn't a platform, and I'll get to that in a second.
How many people remain in the senior team?
Oh, lots. Ooh, 50, 60, I don't know. A lot
Remember,
of people.
the senior team was new processor, new memory management unit, new operating system, new programming language, new
New business model.
New application
new
framework,
battery technology.
New graphics display system, new battery technology, new communication technology, new expansion cards. You know,
I didn't even put this on the list.
The MIT Media Lab crammed into a building at Apple.
This was going to be the first computer to use nickel metal hydride batteries, if I recall correctly.
We had our own battery R&D. Now
We had our battery R&D guy. He was this guy, and he worked in the lab.
Also, new power supply. We were at the time analog power supplies. They're still kind of a black art, but we were very dissatisfied with the large bricks that you typically find as a power supply. We wanted something very, very small that had never been done before, so we had 1 or 2 people doing that.
That's pretty much
for
the whole.
Junior, we had a product manager dedicated initially to the power supply.
That's right. That's pretty much the whole project. Something small that's never been done before, although
Yes.
not necessarily that small to begin with. Anyway, so so then this was, now I had a picture of this I got from the net because somebody, I guess, bought one of these things. Oh, that's yours, okay. This is half a bun warmer. This is a full bun warmer.
Yes, I have one of those.
And so you didn't post a picture of this one, or I would have put it in the talk. So this is the part that is, I'm sorry, this is the part that is essentially a Newton taken apart and screwed into this sort of science fair project.
Message pad 100.
And then, yeah, it's the original, well, no, the original message pad.
Yes.
The one with no number.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So this is all Sharp hardware here. This is like a production prototype. And then, but it's got this special board that has this extra board where you can plug ROM chips onto it. And then it has an even more special board, which God knows how much this thing costs. This is RAM that acts like ROM. And so when you're developing the Newton, you would hook this thing up through this. You would hook this up to your Mac, and you would basically be able to download the ROM into this RAM. And the important, we insisted on this in the software team because by making it RAM, you can set breakpoints in it. And because we were debugging the OS, normally like on Windows or something, you debug by setting breakpoints, and the OS takes care of this magic where you're kind of writing into your program, which you're not supposed to be able to do. Well, there's no magic here because we're implementing the magic, so you have to do hardware magic to make that work.
Did you say that was part of a Sharp wizard somewhere in there?
No, this is the Sharp message pad hardware on this side.
This is the red button.
Do not push the red button.
Push it.
That's got to be the reset switch. Oh, and here's the. Oh, this switch controls the clock speed. You can run it at 31 megahertz or 40 kilohertz. Because somebody soldered a crystal onto it. So I guess we have the Newton accelerator now, right? This is the Newton decelerator. I guess this must be for hardware debugging, so you can slow the whole thing down and see what the heck is going on. Because
Simulate senior.
it's all right. So anyway, this was actually a little later than the period I'm talking about, because this is like a year later when we actually had hardware from Sharp. But
Yes.
but that's the closest thing that I could find. But what we really started developing on was these new bus cards that you plug into your Mac that had an ARM and some glue logic. It really had very little to do with the real hardware, but it was enough to get the software going.
We called these bun warmers because they got very, very warm. And you can actually see the probably Dr. Pepper can ring here on the top. So some beverage was part
Oh,
of it.
here we go. Now this is an Armageddon, right? Is that what we call this?
Arm card.
Yeah, there's two of them. No, this is an Armistice. So this is like the version 2 Armageddon, I think.
The Armageddon was a shorter board.
Yeah, because I think the Armageddon was the one that didn't really pretend to have the real hardware, if I recall right. This has all these FPGAs on the back, which are simulating our ASIC. Some of them are anyway. Let's see. Oh no, maybe not. Let's see. There is our ASIC right there. Okay, yeah. So this is really trying to be the hardware.
Yeah.
So it's got an early version of the ASIC chip there, and then it's got an ARM, and then the ROMs. But this is basically the same exact deal. You can see all these RAMs here. Newtons don't have this much RAM. This is the same where you can download the ROM into RAM and it runs like that. Wow, look at all this stuff. RAM chips were small back then. Oh, it had to be static RAM. It was very, very fast RAM because it had to be as fast as ROM. So each of these things must have cost thousands of dollars. I don't know. I didn't mention there's this funny story about the Hobbit era. We made these very similar boards for the Hobbit, but back then technologies were not advanced to the point where you could do all this surface mount. So they were 2 cards connected by ribbon cable, and we assembled them ourselves because we were in such a hurry, I think, to get them. Colbert designed the things, and the boards arrived in a big bag of parts, and he set up this assembly line. He taught the software people to solder, and we each assembled our own board. It was like a Heathkit thing. And many of them actually worked, which is kind of amazing. Okay, so